That's the problem, Edwin. That's the problem. I'm seeing it through my one-to-one conversations. People are being bounced into making very, very bad property purchasing decisions simply because they are listening to the media and they are being surrounded by all of this waffle from politicians. But you've got to peel below that. You've got to actually ask the fundamental question, what is really going on? Because what's really going on is not what the media is saying is going on.
Look, 100%, man. This is something that we keep on drumming into our followers and viewers over and over again, and also our clients and those that seek our services. But it's really interesting how these to me are deflection points. They're deflecting from reality. The reality is yes, that the market, the property prices are going up in most of the markets of Sydney, but not all, and not all types of properties are going up in value. Not all types of properties are properties that people should be jumping in prematurely or haphazardly without the proper due diligence, without all those safeguards, and also the simple fact that the selling agent is not your friend should be tattooed to your partner's forehead. So when you turn around to your partner and you say, "Hey, honey, do you think you think we should follow the selling agent's advice and bid an extra $5,000?" The first thing you see on your partner's forehead is the selling agent is not your friend, and that'll cost you and save you a lot of money. But look, there's a lot of deflection going on, and you've got to pump this because as I've been saying over and over again, Martin, it's all about the fix. It's all about the candy. It's all about the simple fact that we've got a state and federal government that are hooked on stamp duty and all the taxes that go along with property. So you've got to create. The unfortunate thing is that you've got to create this void of or lack of existing property in order to push the newcomers, both investors and owner-occupiers, first-time buyers, into the dog boxes that they need to build in order to get the fix, the stamp duty revenues, the taxes on the way in, even post purchasing of the land, all the taxes and imposts that go with it, all the levies that go along with it, for the local governments, for all the council contributions and everything else. We need that. They need that fix. So in order to have that on the other on the other end of the funnel or the tunnel, is you've got to create these. You've got to create this demand, and you've got to ramp up the demand, and throttle the supply. And because as we said, it's all the deflection, and right now, we've got government policies that have been of recent years. Where you and I talked about it in 2019, and I say this openly, and have been we've had shared it openly as well before, and that is whether the Libs would have gotten in, whether ScoMo and his cohorts in the real estate arena got in, it was all going to be the same. Nothing was going to be any different. Look at what Albo and Partners Real Estate have done to the nation, to most of the capital cities, and how they've built the demand, and with the promise that they were going to taper down on their immigration policy. And then you got the mainstream media saying, "Oh, don't blame the migrants for the housing crisis, blame the millionaires." We're not blaming the migrants. We've never blamed the migrants. We haven't directly blamed the migrants. We're talking about policy. Then you've got Irish Statistics that put out that chart that's showing a huge percentage growth in overseas in new migrants entering different parts of the Sydney region and markets. I mean it's phenomenal what's happening. And of course now you've got also the AFR, Martin, talking Labor must buy into the debate of immigration and population. So when the AFR start pushing that narrative, it's time that the discussion needs to be had. You can't hide this anymore, but the government will continue to deflect, and because they need that fix, they need that rush, that stamp duty rush.
Absolutely, and just to be clear, I'm not anti-migrants at all. The truth is that Australia has been built on the back of migration, but when you actually have strong migration and nothing to support it, so no alignment of the home building program to be able to meet the migration targets, that you got more people coming in, but it's deliberate. That is the point. It is a deliberate process that has been effectively engineered over several parliaments. So this isn't just the last 2 or 3 years, although there's been a very significant ramp up. And it's quite interesting. There was a report that came out mapping social cohesion. And this report, which included the ANU and a few other players as well, was that 49% of people say that the number of immigrants to Australia is too high, significantly higher than the 33% recorded in 2023 and the 41% in 2019 prior to COVID-19. So, they conclude that Australians are now evenly split about the issue of migration. But the point is, migration without the support, and I don't just mean housing, but I mean the social programs, and also health and education and infrastructure and all the other nuts and bolts you need to put together. Now, if we had a joined up piece of thinking that put all that together, we might stand a chance of being able to handle such strong migration. But then when you actually realize that migration is probably upticking rather than downticking, despite what the government would want to present, the recent national accounts, if you sort of impute what the numbers are, it looks like it's going up again. And of course, we had the overseas movements in and out, and they were stronger. Now, those are early indicators, but it does look as though the migration is going to be very strong. We've got 25,000 more students coming in over the next academic year as well. So you put all that together, and what you can say is that the government settings are still feeding the hopper. So more people coming into the country, which means that we have more people demanding somewhere to rent or maybe somewhere to buy a bit later. And then that puts them in direct contention between those in Australia trying to buy, trying to find somewhere to rent. And, there's a natural consequence of all of this. And this is actually a chart that was published quite recently. How much more Aussie renters will pay by the time we get to 2030. And this is actually from CBRE. And they estimate that on average, you could be looking at a significant further rise in apartment rents over the next few years. Why? Because the fact of the matter is that we've got more people needing somewhere to live than we have properties that are available and accessible. We have very low, of course, construction levels, much lower than previously. And then the final point of the jigsaw puzzle and the types of property that now are being pushed into the market, the high-rise dog boxes aren't necessarily where people want to live either. So we've got this massive web of issues here. But the net result is, if you're an ordinary Australian and you're trying to actually make a decision about should I try and buy a property or should I trade up or whatever, right? Particularly if I'm in the rental sector and my rents are continuing to rise, you're being confronted with this wall of news and noise to say FOMO, buy now, buy now, buy now. And unfortunately, in my one-to-one conversations, I'm getting more and more people who actually have buyer's regret. So they bought something without doing the due diligence. They didn't actually get the necessary, independent survey. They relied on the vendor advertiser. The survey that's the survey that's part of the marketing campaign. And unfortunately, for the cost of maybe $3,000 to $5,000 to get a decent survey done, they're now up for hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional costs than they thought. And they've got a property that is also not performing as they thought it might. And that's another issue that I think people are beginning to wake up to. This idea that property is uniformly rising everywhere is just, frankly, not right. It is actually a very different story when you look at it in practice. And quite often what you find is that the movements up are a little bit random, depending on where you look. And, as I showed in my other show, if you look at North Ryde apartments, they're actually still cheaper than they were 10 years ago. Cheaper, and that's not allowing for inflation. So effectively, if you bought in 10 years ago, you actually lost money. If you bought in a few years later, depending on where you bought, you're probably also underwater too. So this idea that all properties magically every few years double in value is just rubbish, which means people need to have much stronger discrimination on the decisions they take and the basis on which they make those decisions.
Yeah, I just want to go back a couple of steps there, Martin. One is the building and pest inspection, an independent one. It'll only cost you between $650 to $750, depending on whether or not you want the thermal imaging to see if the stud walls have got any little nasties in there that because it's on the slab or the building inspector can't get underneath into the through the manhole into the subfloor area because it's not that high. It's only a few courses off the ground. So so when you look at those numbers, when you look at relative costs around Sydney, I can get them done for $750, a very thorough inspection. Our inspectors take up to from 1.5 hours to 2 hours to inspect the property, not the 15-minute in and out reports that you get from before you buy. The ones that are handed by the vendor's agent. Needless to say, that's thought with danger anyway. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that there are, as we've shared before, when different legislations come into play or replaced regulations that for instance the Residential Tenancies Act and the new regs that were enforced not too long ago. You and I spoke about it, and we shared and we told our viewers and our followers that there were certain parts of Sydney and certain types of properties that were going to be affected, and we were going to get a possible retreat in prices in those areas because of the changes to the conditions of the rental conditions that landlords could rent those properties, and if they didn't abide by those new rental conditions, well then the properties would be sidelined for anywhere between 6 to 12 months that you can't rent it on the short-term market or under a fixed-term lease. So that was going to put a bit of pressure on certain markets, in the Sydney region and outside of the Sydney region, further out the outskirts of the Sydney region. And lo and behold, there are markets that we're currently looking at with our clients for, and the prices that have been asked for those properties are prices where they paid for freestanding homes I'm talking about freestanding homes, mate, not apartments, but freestanding homes that they paid for back in 2021 and 2022. Our offers are sitting in more or less what they paid for, plus the stamp duty and a little bit of a little bit that they've invested to spruce up the property. So in other words, the markets don't necessarily run upwards all the time, but you have to be aware. And that notion of, as I say over and over again, it's the notion of pushing it and creating internal confusion and internal demand by these call them grants, call them strategies, whatever you want to call them, that the government dishes out at first home buyers. All it does is just stake up areas. But my theory is my conspiracy theory has been all along, and that is you've got to create the demand in order to corral and push the people into the new developments, because that is where the government gets most of its fix from. If you want to buy a kilo of Colombian gold, you don't go to the ACT. You go directly to Colombia. That sort of stuff. So you go to the source, and the source of the revenues for the government is the taxes on the way in, throughout the inception of the property, and on the resale and on the sale, and then uptake on the other end. So you've got to create this demand. When I say you create it, you push and you force people to jump into the market that are holding other asset investment classes, and they see themselves that, hold on a minute, we're not building anything. So shit, I can't live in my crypto. I can't. The missus is putting pressure on me, to buy, and there's pressures all around. And then you've got all these other gimmicks and policies that are thrown at the industry, but for the reason other than to create that demand in order for the stamp duty revenue to come in. I mean, that's on the surface. I mean, there's a lot more to it, as you and I know. But that's how, if many would see it that way, they would sit back. People would sit back and take a breath. And the unfortunate thing is, as you and I shared before the beginning of the rant, of many stories of people that have been caught out. And because they don't get their independent inspections done, they don't use professionals to work for them, rather than using the professionals that work for the vendor. Then they get caught out, or because they thought they were going to save a very small percentage, on the way through. And it ends up costing them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's the sad part about about purchasing under that emotional pressure.
Absolutely. Emotional pressure is actually right. And in fact, a couple of the articles talked about the emotion, and there was a commentary, I think, about the new owners of Domain went around and looked at auctions, and they were surprised at just how much emotion is there seen in the auctions that are going on. And the other thing, of course, is that there are consequences of these decisions.